What's up? What's up? What's up? Hello. One second. Hi. Hi, everyone. Wait, can I hear myself? Okay. Just 1 second. एक बार मैं फोन को भी कनेक्ट कर लेता हूँ. Cool. Hi, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Chalchitra Talks. This is Understanding Films with Rahul, and today we are talking about a film called Persona by Ingmar Bergman. Jibin PK, much needed stream. I love this film, but don't know why I love it. I think I had a similar reaction when I first watched it, but actually I just rewatched it a few hours ago and I finished watching it a few hours ago. और जब मैंने पहली बार देखी थी तब भी मतलब I had a very strange reaction to it. मतलब I knew that my mind had been blown, and I think I went to my professor the next day and I said like, I don't understand what this is, but I just know that I'm so attracted to this film and I think it's a masterpiece. But yeah, I also didn't understand what it actually was. तो अभी जब मैंने लेकिन रीवॉच करी और मैंने एक पर्टिकुलर गेज से देखी और मैं देखते देखते सारे नोट्स बना रहा था. आई हैव अराउंड 4 pages ऑफ नोट्स ऑन लॉन्ग पेजेस इस फिल्म के लिए अभी. तो वी हैव अ लॉट ऑफ थिंग्स टू कवर and maybe matlab I will also figure out while we are having this interaction why I also like this film, because this is a film that can be talked about so much and it would be great if all of us actually could understand this together. तरुण जैन, वाओ भाई मैंने देखा नहीं है. ओ चलेगा लेकिन ठीक है, मतलब बर्गमैन फिर भी अगर आप जानते हो तो यू विल रिलेट. रोहन दैथनाकर, आई डिड नॉट अंडरस्टैंड इट बट आई लव्ड इट, लव्ड द एम्बिग्युइटी. I think there is something to ambiguity that's just so attractive and so intriguing. Matlab, you want to figure it out, but even if you don't, it still remains interesting. One sec, I'll just see if my audio and everything is cool. ठीक है, I think बढ़िया ही चल रहा है. So before we begin, I'm not going to give you an introduction of Bergman because वो हमने first episode में कर लिया था. I think we talked about him in detail उस वाले episode में, but I will just quickly jump into the film actually, and maybe I should show you some pictures of the cast and Bergman. So we have B.B. Anderson, Ingmar Bergman, and Liv Ullmann. Liv Ullmann is the one on the left, and B.B. Anderson is the one on the right, and in the center we see Ingmar Bergman. So I think at some point Bergman was in a romantic relationship with Anderson, but he was also attracted to Ullman, as he said. And I think B.B. Anderson said in an interview that Bergman was very interested in our friendship because B.B. Anderson and Liv Ullmann had worked together and they were really good friends. And so she was recorded by press in saying about the film that Bergman was for some reason very interested in our friendship and he wanted to be a part of it. It, he wanted to come in between the friendship and understand it, which is why also, I mean, that's one of the reasons why he also made the film. We will look at some of the BTS pictures. This is Ingmar Bergman on the sets. That's another picture of Ingmar Bergman, and I'm assuming that that's Sven Nykvist who was his cinematographer, and I think they're framing a shot here. और ये क्राइटेरियन वाला पोस्टर था पर्सोना का ओरिजिनल पोस्टर इतना कुछ अट्रैक्टिव नहीं था इसलिए मैं यही दिखा रहा हूँ क्राइटेरिया ने जब रिलीज करी थी ये फिल्म वापस तो उसका ये पोस्टर था बट बिफोर वी बिगिन मैं एक बार देखता हूँ कि यूट्यूब पे क्या चल रहा है एंड देन वी कैन टॉक अबाउट इट Abhinav Pathak was missing you, bro. Gaurav Munjal. Hi, Gaurav Munjal is here. He just joined Godfather. Hi, Gaurav. Abhinav Pathak was missing you, bro. Hi, Abhinav. Thank you for missing me, I guess. But now I'm back. I had my college exams last week. So that's why I was busy with that. But अब मैं काफी free हूँ और we can definitely do more of these streams and maybe I can also participate more with Chalchitra Talk stuff. Um, Jivan PK, no one can spoil a Bergman film, so it's okay if you haven't watched the film, I guess. That's true, actually. There's no spoilers with this one also. I mean, this is, see, with Bergman, it's more about interpretation anyway. So I don't know if anybody can spoil interpretation for you. Rishabh Kaushik, call Vineet Masaram once, please. He has a video essay on this movie, and it's one of his all-time favorite. Yes, I think I saw the video essay a long time ago. It's an interesting video essay, and I wouldn't be surprised if Vineet Masaram uh, would think Bergman is a great filmmaker. Persona is my favorite film by Bergman also. I think it's also his most successful, one of his most successful, and one of his most popular also. But I think it's for a reason that it's the most popular. It's a great film. And I was reading about the time when this film was made. I think it was made in 1966. So that was also a time, and this was also pointed out in a video essay that I was watching about it. Wow, another person has mentioned Vineet Masaram. He must be a big fan of Bergman then. At some point, maybe we can have him on a Bergman discussion. So this came out in 1966, and before this, Bergman had only made films that were based on the themes of existentialism, God is dead, silence, why is God silent, post-war sort of identity crisis. But within this time, the French New Wave had also happened, and Bergman had realized, along with a lot of filmmakers in Europe, that experimentation within form was also possible. And so now he was looking at a lot of ways in which he could also experiment with camera and editing. And you see a lot of that in this film. I would say that this is Bergman's most experimental film. Correct me if I'm wrong in the live chat, but I would definitely say so. I think this is Bergman's Breathless in a way because he's experimenting so much within the form. He's breaking the fourth wall so many times, and he's just doing so many things that he hasn't done in his other films. His plot has always been strong, and his writing is excellent in this film also. But the way that he's experimenting, especially with editing in this, and you see that in the opening montage that we will look at in a bit, it's amazing and it's so ahead of its time. I'm not too sure what that phrase means anymore, ahead of its time, but I still want to say it like it's ahead of its time, just in terms of even technology and in terms of what was possible with celluloid at that moment. Because imagine like, and we look at the montage, like this was shot on film and this was cut on film. इतना experimentation उस समय के लिए. So it's definitely way, way, way ahead. do one on 2001 A Space Odyssey. यार अब ना मतलब this also is very ambitious of me to even attempt to understand Persona on a live stream, but maybe we will also do 2001 now since we are entering this ambitious space. Rishabh Kaushik, yes, I have seen the movie. It's popular. Bergman has a huge influence on Scorsese and many other directors I have heard. Definitely. Bergman Scorsese को बहुत ज़्यादा influence किया है. And Scorsese, I think, has gone on record to say that he has been very influenced by Bergman. और बहुत सारे यूरोपियन filmmakers को भी actually इन्होंने बहुत influence करा है. Okay, so I think we can look at the film now, but before we do that, I do want to say that I rewatched this today. I've seen this film twice, and I'm really just on this film the same as you, and I'm going to look at this film just sort of as a film viewer and a film as a film enthusiast. So if you also have any thoughts about this film, please write them down in the live chat and we can sort of take the film together. I also do have a lot to say about it, but it's just that I don't have one analysis of it because this is, as I said earlier, it's more about interpretation. So I will tell you what I found interesting and how Bergman is experimenting in it, and maybe we can use that as a segue to talk about other things. But whatever thoughts you have about the film, please write them down in the live chat below and we will take it up and we will discuss it. Okay, I'll just take like a 10-second break and then we can jump into the film. Cool. So before we begin, I did want to say कि persona essentially means, I think it's Latin for mask, and it essentially in modern usage it means that like you say like we have a every person at this point like has a persona of themselves. There's something that you think is yourself, but if you think about it, then each person that you know in your life sees you as something else. Like you are a different perception in each person's mind that you have met or have interacted with. So maybe there is a general persona of you, and that is usually with most people different from what they actually are. And also मतलब सोशल मीडिया की एज में तो इंस्टाग्राम की एज में इट्स वेरी इजी काइंड ऑफ टू हैव अ persona of your own that is different from what you actually are as your real self, and Instagram has only exaggerated that need for us to sort of project this persona onto the public. And it's also made it quite convenient actually. In fact, yesterday I had posted something on my Instagram story about like how millennials use Instagram and social media to sort of have this artificial social closeness just to meet their basic human needs. And it's become very easy for them to sort of just come to social media, get their fix of validation, and then go back to living their lives. So this was an article that I read and I posted a snippet of it, but I got very interesting responses to that. A lot of people agreed with it, a lot of people were vehemently against it. The question essentially was that like is real friendship actually possible on social media? And while almost everybody does agree at this point that most people are projecting like a persona on social media, and if you're friends with somebody on social media, you're essentially friends with their persona and not their actual selves, unless you've met them in real life. So, using that modern context as a segue into this film that came out in 1966 makes us understand that persona has always been a thing in human nature and in human condition. There's always that outer projection that we're all doing that may or may not be our authentic or genuine selves. So this film is one of the themes in this film is that, but this film has a wide variety of themes that it explores. It explores duality, it explores schizophrenia, it explores even homosexuality, it explores sexual tension, But I think for the most part, today we will talk about duality and we will talk about what it is to sort of have that persona conflict wherein at some point you struggle with identifying what is your real self. Is it the persona that you project onto other people when you are with people, or are you actually who you are when you're alone? So that becomes an interesting sort of psychology discussion. Maybe we will get into that at some point. But to begin with, also I did want to say that I read on Wikipedia that this film is called the Mount Everest of films, of film criticism, because almost all film critics have tried and attempted to analyze this film, and they all have their own interpretations of it. Susan Sontag, who is a writer that I admire very much, she has also written quite academically about this film, and so have a lot of other people, and they all have their own interpretation. Some of them disagree with each other, but this is sort of like climbing the Mount Everest for film critics. This is that film because it just has so much that can be talked about, so much that can be debated about, and we will see that in a moment. So, moving to the film actually. So this is the opening sequence in the film. And as I said, that he's experimenting a lot within the editing as a form. And so, and he also wants to make sure, just as it was in Breathless, that the audience is very aware that they're watching a film. And he also talks about the process of the film as if it's a very self-aware film in a way. And I think the fourth wall is being broken every 20 minutes or so by some character or the other. So in the opening sequence, we see that there is the carbon thing that sort of lights that is responsible for the light behind the projector. We see that happening, and then we see the film rolling, and then we have all these cartoon images, and then we have images of crucifixion when the uh, नेल को जीसस क्राइस्ट के हाथ के अंदर डाला गया था क्रॉस के पहले. So a lot of that image. We already know that Bergman had a very strict religious upbringing because his father, Eric Bergman, he was a minister at the Church of Sweden. And so during his childhood, he had a very strict Christian upbringing. But he is also quite famously quoted, Ingmar Bergman, to say that at the age of 8, he lost his faith in God. Because more often than not, what happens is if the upbringing is so strict, then the child grows up to become rebellious. And because now the curiosity to actually find what's real and what's bullshit is more. And so Bergman was trying to find that through his films. And you see so much of Christianity references in his films. And even in the beginning, he has crucifixion images. Now, this entire montage can be decoded and analyzed in its own way. But what I did understand from it was that he's trying to sort of summarize cinema and what it is for him and where it starts and where it ends. और उसका पूरा प्रोसेस उसने एक बताया. बीच में लुई बुनियल की ऊंची आंदोलन की इमेजरी आती है. बीच में बहुत सारे कार्टून्स आते हैं. And then we actually see an image of old people and their bodies who presumably are dead. But and it jump cuts to, like, we look at this woman and she's sleeping and her eyes is closed, and this is just the beginning. But he establishes what the film is actually about right in the beginning, just as sort of a visual metaphor. So we see that her eyes are closed right now, but there's a jump cut to her eyes are open. So this again is a metaphor for duality. And I was looking at one of Bergman's interviews, and he was saying that he got the idea for this film actually when he was suffering from pneumonia and he was at the hospital, I think, for 8 months. And he even wrote the script for this film while he was recovering from pneumonia in the hospital. And in an interview, he was recounting that at some point in his life, he had taken an anesthesia because a surgery was going to be done on his body. And so during that stage wherein he was anesthetized, yeah, he had taken the anesthesia basically. तो उनकी जब वो इंजेक्शन लगा उनकी बॉडी में, एंड ही क्लियरली रिमेम्बर्स दैट एट वन मोमेंट ही वाज कॉन्शियस, और उसके डायरेक्टली बाद इमीडिएटली ही बिकेम अनकॉन्शियस. एंड ही सेज दैट इट वाज ऑलमोस्ट एज इफ आई स्टॉप्ड एग्जिस्टिंग for those couple of hours when the surgery was going to happen. And so that to him became very interesting, and that led to his thoughts of duality. What is it to be at one moment be consciously living and existing and be aware of what this experience is, and then the next moment you go to not really existing that consciously. So these are also themes that he explores in this film. And then we see, as I said, fourth wall का काफी इन्होंने break किया है. We see an image of a little boy और कैमरा के ऊपर वो almost ऐसा हाथ लगाते हैं. And then we cut to he's looking at an image of a woman, and a lot of people have said that, and it also becomes clear in the film actually after a point, that this is a boy who's longing for motherly love or motherly affection, and that's something that is missing in his life, and so he's longing for that unreciprocated love from his mother. So that's sort of his gaze. There is no evidence to say that this was Bergman when he was a child, but because I understand that he had a problematic relationship with his father, but I don't know if it was the same with his mother, but it can just be a character also. मैं एक बार थोड़े comments पढ़ लेता हूँ and then we'll look at the next sequence. Tarun Jain, what headphones? I think these are just JBL Bluetooth headphones. I'm not sure what model it is, but I've had these for a couple of years. Sejal Mal, Aditya Dubey, who invented method acting? I don't know. Can somebody invent something like that? I'm not too sure. Stanislavski, okay, Russian. Man, Russian people have experimented so much and they have also been such great innovators, especially in arts. Lately, I've really gotten into playing chess online, and I've realized that so many of the chess grandmasters in the world are actually Russians. रशिया की कोई ऐसे मेनस्ट्रीम मीडिया इमेजरी नहीं है मेरे पास मतलब आई हैव नो आइडिया व्हाट गोज ऑन इन रशिया इन अ रेगुलर स्मॉल टाउन इन रशिया आई हैव इमेजेस ऑफ सेंट पीटर्सबर्ग एंड other big cities, but what happens in Russia I have no idea. What's a regular Russian like? Then Stella Adler, Lee Strasberg, Stanford. I've heard of Lee Strasberg. Sajal Mal. The video contains spoilers. No, I don't think this will have any spoilers. But if you are somebody who is that cautious about it, then maybe you should watch the film first and then come back. कुछ समझ नहीं आया था Persona के बारे में first time I watched. That can be an experience. This is one of those films wherein you have to be completely mindful about everything. और इस बार तो मैं जब बैठा था मैं पूरा कॉपी लेके बैठा था और मैं नोट्स बना रहा था पूरे टाइम. तो आई वॉज पॉजिंग और मैं देख रहा था कि इसका क्या मतलब है, क्या बोल रहे हैं, क्या हो सकता है. Watch it again, sit without your phone, look at the screen the entire time and actually notice what is being said. Actually read out the dialogues, मतलब subtitles में. And I realized while I was watching this, Abhi, ki this is written so well. I think people mostly see Bergman as a filmmaker, but he's also such a great writer. If you look at the writing in this film, each dialogue sequence is constructed so well. एंड ऑलिवर असेज जो एक फ्रेंच फिल्म मेकर है, उनका एक इंटरव्यू है, तो उसमें वो एग्जैक्टली यही चीज कह रहे हैं कि राइटिंग कितनी अच्छी है बर्गमैन की. एंड आई एम सो हैप्पी दैट ही इज पॉइंटिंग इट आउट. But I think since Bergman also had a theater background and a theater upbringing, Tarun Jain, you would be surprised. A lot of people that I also know keep checking their phone, keep checking their Instagram and WhatsApp while they're watching a film. You would be surprised. Rishabh Kaushik, spoiler won't affect anything. Rishabh Kaushik, the movie is plotless. I wouldn't say it's plotless, but the plot isn't that obvious. So with these films, really spoilers are actually nothing. This was very different from what he has done. Somewhere Kubrick did it much later. I was also thinking about Shutter Island while I was watching this. Not exactly the same thing, but in a way. But yeah, this also gave me a lot of Kubrick vibes. even in terms of the music and the background score. The music was made by, I was reading somewhere, it was made by three cellos and four violins. That's what it took to sort of create that score of this film. Nobi Michael, Persona isn't a movie that requires an explanation, it is an experience. The images speak for themselves. You don't even need the dialogue subtitles. That might be one way to watch the film, but I would definitely say that the writing in this film is so strong and it adds to the character and the experience. And this film almost makes me wish that I spoke and understood Swedish because I'm just afraid that like so much might be lost in translation. But the images in themselves also, which is what I was saying, that since Bergman has a background in theater, he understands what angles are, he understands what lighting is, and so he's able to direct his cinematographers better in those ways. And if you look at this film also, the photography of this film is excellent. It's so good. एंड कई कई सीन्स में हम ये भी देखते हैं कि द एंटायर सीन इज ऑल्सो आउट ऑफ फोकस एंड देन इट स्नैप्स इनटू फोकस. कई कई सीन्स में हम देखते हैं कि पीछे से पूरी लाइट है और फेस बिल्कुल भी लिट नहीं है, बट इट स्टिल समहाउ मेक सेंस इन द फिल्म एंड इट्स शॉट बाय सेन राइकिस्ट who also has a fascination for faces and he really knows how to light faces. उनके portrait shots बहुत खतरनाक होते हैं. तो before moving forward, I do want to tell you what the a little bit about the plot, and we will actually just see that through the images only. So basically, Persona is a film about, or at least the premise is that this is a theater actor, and she suddenly has this crisis in her life wherein she's performing on the stage, and in the middle of the performance, she falls silent, and then she looks around as if she's surprised, and for a minute she's silent on the stage, and then suddenly she starts laughing because she just felt like she should laugh. She felt an urge to laugh. And then she apologizes later to her colleagues, but then she's just fallen into sort of a phase of silence. She's not saying anything after that, after this moment that she had on the stage. And so they bring her to the hospital afterwards, and then they assign this nurse to help her out with her problems. But they realize that उनका कोई mental problem नहीं है, उनका कोई physical problem नहीं है. She's completely fit. It's just that she's had sort of this crisis while being on the stage, while she's performing, and suddenly she's thinking, wait, but what's my actual identity if this is my persona? And suddenly she's just tired of performing and lying and she wants to be her genuine self. And so she's just fallen into silence and she's not saying anything because, and we later understand that, and this is, I'm sure if any of you has ever had such an experience, and if you've been, attracted to silence in this way, and if you've fallen into silence for many weeks or months, then maybe you will relate, but I think this is something that everybody can also understand that at some point you think, but am I being genuine if I say this? Am I being authentic? And if not, should I even speak? I think this is something that all of us do go through. And she keeps laughing because, and this also reminded me of that ending sequence in Parasite, wherein matlab life just gets so complicated for him after a point, the boy in Parasite, that he can do nothing but laugh after everything happens, the ending scene. He just starts laughing because everything is just so absurd, like he cannot understand what he is going through also. So what really just helps in such a sequence is that you have to develop humor about it. If you watch the film तो आप ये भी देखेंगे कि unlike other Bergman films and also unlike other films at the time, we see that the camera very violently and very immediately moves from, in some sequences, from one object to another if it wants to disorient the viewer and if it wants to shift the perspective of the audience. So right now we're looking at her, and this happens at least three times, and I will tell you when. This is one of them. We are looking at the back of the nurse's head, and suddenly the camera very violently sort of moves towards her hands. and then we see her hands. So this is the premise, and this is what establishes this persona conflict in this character. So we move on, and then we see at some point that the senior nurse in the at the hospital, she realizes that there is actually nothing wrong with her and she's just playing a role. It's another role that she's playing as a theater actor. And so this is a longish sequence, but I do want to show all of it because the writing in this is so good. And Bergman wrote this himself. And as I said, he wrote this while he was recovering from pneumonia. तो आसपास पूरी हॉस्पिटल की इमेजरी और उसी जोन में थे वो. So essentially, this is the conflict when she describes this. अब हम ये पढ़ते हैं एक बार. So she says, "You think I don't understand the hopeless dream of being, not seeming to be, but being, conscious and awake at every moment. At the same time, the chasm between what you are to others and what you are to yourself. The feeling of vertigo and the constant hunger to be unmasked once and for all, to be seen through, cut down, perhaps even annihilated. Every tone of voice a lie, every gesture a falsehood, every smile a grimace. Commit suicide? No, that's too nasty. One doesn't do things like that. But you can refuse to talk or move. Then at least you're not lying. You can cut yourself off, close yourself in, then you needn't play any roles, wear any masks, make any false gestures. So you might think, but reality plays. So you might think that you're hiding in a safe place, but your hiding place isn't watertight enough. Reality plays nasty tricks on you. Life oozes in from all sides. You're forced to react. No one asks whether it's genuine or not, whether you're lying or telling the truth. Questions like that only matter in the theater, and hardly even there. I understand you, Elizabeth. I understand that you're not speaking or moving, that you have turned this apathy into a fantastic setup. And in the next shot, we see that her eyes are suddenly closed. Look at this. As soon as she says, "You've turned this apathy into a fantastic setup," she closes her eyes. I understand and admire you. I think you should play this part until it's played out, until it's no longer interesting. Then you can drop it just as you eventually drop all your other roles. So, this is a person who understands the conflict that she's suffering from. And she gives it to her so straightforward, and she gives it to her blankly that I get what you're doing, but like snap out of it whenever you feel like this character is also done and dusted. So the writing in this was actually so raw, and if you say look at especially lines like every tone of voice a lie, every gesture a falsehood, every smile a grimace. So she's describing basically the persona conflict wherein you don't actually even have to be an actor to understand this. This happens with regular people also, wherein sometimes you're just questioning whether what you're saying or doing is even genuine actually, or whether it's a lie. And sometimes people fall into those conflicts, not all the time, but sometimes you become so self-conscious and self-aware that you're thinking, oh wait, but what am I doing? And if you've been in that zone, then you will relate to this monologue. Not monologue, but this dialogue. And while I was rewatching this, Abhi, I was imagining Bergman actually writing all of this while he's in the hospital and he's suffering from pneumonia. And what must be going through his head to be creating characters like this? It's such an interesting premise in itself, like this character who has stopped speaking altogether. She doesn't want to speak any longer, and she's silent all the time. And so now you have another nurse character who's supposed to help her out. Before we move to this sequence, एक बार हम comments और पढ़ लेते हैं. Bergman was a lonely man. Most probably, most probably. I think that's how he sort of had such a deep understanding of the human condition. And you also see a lot of that loneliness in his films, in his characters. They're mostly lonely people. And there's also something that film critics write about a lot, which is that he has an obsession with islands. A lot of his films are shot in a very secluded space on islands in Sweden. And this film was also actually shot on an island called Faroe. Half of the film was shot at Bergman's residence, and the other half was shot at a museum. The hospital sequences are shot in the museum. But even say if you look at films like Through the Glass Darkly, that's also completely based on an island. And so he likes to seclude his characters from the rest of the world. And then he sort of plays out the plot in that excluded space. So the loneliness is sort of prevalent in the atmosphere of the film, in the mise en scène. Is prevalent a word? Prevalent. Widespread in a particular area or a particular time. Rishabh Kaushik, existentialism is a part of every good director. Maybe, but I've actually been thinking about this. Like there is a certain kind of a psychology that would attract somebody to visual art or visual imagery. Because when we were looking at Hugo also we were talking about how when Scorsese was a kid, he could not go out because he had a severe form of asthma. So he would look at the entire city and other kids playing through his window on his at his parents' house. And so he was a very lonely child growing up. And so when you grow up that way, you depend on your imagination a lot, your visual imagination a lot to give you adventure and sort of excitement in life. So I'm sure you grow up a certain way if you've had that kind of a childhood, and you're attracted to visual images more than a regular person would be. So there is, although I do need to read more literature about this, but I'm sure there is a correlation between being attracted to visual images and maybe being a lonely person or having some kind of an obsession with existentialism. I can find it in most movies of Scorsese. Gotta shout out his cinematographer, probably the best cinematographer of all time. Definitely, I would say he's definitely up there. Sven Nykvist की आप especially थ्रू द ग्लास डार्कली में इमेजरी देखिएगा आप, और जो हमने शायद कवर भी किया था फर्स्ट एपिसोड में विंटर लाइट, उसमें भी जो मोनोलॉग है फीमेल प्रोटैगनिस्ट का, उसको जो लाइट जैसे करते हैं ना वो फेस को, मतलब ही इज अ मास्टर एट इट. Genuinely he knows how to light up each and every muscle on the face. He was that much of a master at what he did. Anyway, moving back to the film. So and I was reading about this on the Wikipedia for the film Abhi, when Bergman actually pitched the film to the producer and the funder, he said that this is a film about two women who are wearing big hats and they're sitting alongside the beach and they're comparing each other's hands. That was his pitch to the producer. And luckily the producer agreed to make the film. And now we have Persona. So there is an actual scene where that exactly happens in the film. And then they're comparing hands, but they realize, she says that, don't you know it's bad luck to compare hands? Now, this is when both of them begin to live at a summer house because the senior nurse realizes that there is no point in keeping her at the hospital because she is physically and mentally healthy. So the problem is somewhere else. Maybe she just needs support and maybe she just needs some me time. And so they take her to this beach house essentially. So now the conversations that happen at this place are super interesting. And essentially, what ends up happening is this nurse character, she starts opening up to her because she's taken by silence, the actor. And so, in a way, she becomes a great listener because she, by herself, has nothing to contribute to the conversation. She's just listening and observing. And this is also, the nurse is a character who also says at some point in this conversation that not a lot of people actually hear me out when I speak. You know, you're such a good listener, and I think all people should be like you. So she just really opens up to her and she lets out all her deepest secrets in the same day, actually. As this day progresses, the intensity of the secrets that she's revealing to the actor also sort of keep leveling up. And she talks about her first love, and she talks about, we will also later see, I think after this, she describes also a beach orgy that she had at some point. And so she goes into explicit details about that with her patient. So we begin with, I was terribly in love and he was the first. I remember it all like one long torment. This is a line that's also, I think, quite popular in like film memes these days because it's such a great format. Like you can remember so many things as a one long torment. Like this was for me IIT JEE coaching that I went to in 11th grade, or really just all of school, really. And 2 years of engineering were also one long torment. But I see this in so many memes these days. People just say this about any bad experience or a bad relationship, even in their life. Now, this is also something that I wanted to read out, and I think Bergman wrote this also. And this is the actor, just to point it out again. This is the actor, and she's the nurse. So in this sequence, the nurse is reading out one something that she's reading to the actor. So she says, here's what it says. All the anxiety we carry within us, all our thwarted dreams, the inexplicable cruelty, our fear of extinction, the painful insight into our earthly condition, have slowly crystallized our hope for an otherworldly salvation. The tremendous cry of our faith and doubt against the darkness and silence is the most terrifying proof of our abandonment and our unuttered knowledge. So again, Bergman's obsession with sort of God's silence comes out here as well. But then she says right after reading that, I don't believe that. I don't think that's true. So in a way, this is also a character establishment of her right in the beginning, or rather middle now of the film. And then later on in the next scene, we also see that she tells you what she does believe in and what she does like in a later conversation. She says, I believe life has meaning. You find meaning in the work that you do, and I like that, and that's the kind of person I am. So, in a way, you also see that the actor is sort of a more mature, a more grown up person, and she has sort of been disillusioned by the falsity of life. And from her years while working as an actor, she has been able to explore herself in ways that the nurse hasn't been able to. And so she's a person now who's become cold and she's become uh, quite unreachable, really. And she doesn't really feel as much as the nurse does. So she's taken into silence, but the nurse is still a little naive and she opens up quickly and she lets out her vulnerabilities and she's bad at keeping boundaries. So you see that there are two different kinds of people. The actor is already a corrupt person. The nurse is actually a kind soul who, but still she knows that she has conflicts with her other self in a way. And here is where duality also comes in. And her other self is essentially, and this is something that one of the film reviews said, that the duality essentially exists in the human condition between our primate sexual desire and the emotional and spiritual connection that we feel in a relationship. So that's in a way the duality that is being explored here as well. That sometimes you operate out of your primate natural sexual desire if you're in a relationship. But sometimes it may also be the case that that's the only thing that's there in a relationship. There is no emotional or spiritual connection. And so if that is absent in the relationship, and if it is just primate desires, then that is going to lead to conflict. And that's in a way also something the film talks about. And this is the scene that I was talking about where she describes the orgy incident that she had. Interesting detail and trivia about this sequence is that, um, and I was reading this on the Wikipedia, that Bergman had actually shot the entire thing in this room. And then, but then later when he was watching the footage, he realized that the the delivery was not up to the mark. Like she was being a little too excited about the orgy story, and so they dubbed this dialogue later on. और उन्होंने इनको बोला था कि आप थोड़ा स्लो वॉइस में और थोड़ा और ऐसा सटल बताओ ये पूरा। तो इस पूरे सीक्वेंस में एक्चुअली जो ऑडियो है वो डब्ड है। अगर आप फिल्म देखेंगे तो कई कई सीक्वेंसेस में आप समझ भी पाते हैं कि हाँ ये थोड़ा सा डब्ड है। बिफोर गोइंग टू द ऑर्जी सीक्वेंस एक बार हम कमेंट्स देख लेते हैं क्या हो रहा है। You need peace and solace to think. Yeah, well, I can find it in most movies of Scorsese. Loneliness, but without depression. Loneliness without depression is actually just solitude, which is not a bad thing at all. How much did you get in Maze Not Yet? I don't even remember, dude. I think I got 55 or something. But I think chemistry mein I had either negative or zero. Why this film giving vibes of Aventura by Michelangelo Antonioni? I haven't watched that film. JE Rat spotted at Tarun Jain. I was also a JE Rat. Just joking, don't take it seriously. I remember it as one long torment. Okay, coming back to this sequence. So she's describing the orgy sequence and she says that we had those cheap straw hats on. Actually, there isn't much interesting things happening in this orgy sequence, just that she's opening up to her now at a very intense level. And she says, everybody should be like you. You're really listening to me. I think you're the first person who's ever listened to me. And then this is the first time in the film where the duality conversation is actually so obvious. And she slips out that, is it possible to be one and the same person at the very same time? I mean, two people. And then she quickly says that, cuts her off and says that, God, I'm being silly. And I'm just blabbering about now. But this is the first time that it is actually mentioned in dialogue. Now, she at some point also says that at one night I was watching a film of yours and I came back and I looked in the mirror and I thought, we look alike and I could turn into you if I really tried. So now this is a very childish ambition that she has and through the conversation we also see that she admires this actor so much and she wants to be like her. And so she says that if I really tried, I could turn myself into you. But what was interesting to me was the dialogue that you could be me if you wanted to, just like that. You would fit into my body, but your soul would be far too big. It would leak out from the body. I'm just imagining Bergman writing this, and in my head, it's a very interesting image. So again, she says that, and now this is kind of bordering on schizophrenia. So this is the first time in the film that we hear the actor speaking. She says, "Go to bed," and she actually whispers it. She says, "Go to bed, or you'll fall asleep here at the table." And suddenly, that thought is transported into her head, and she says, "The nurse, I must go to bed now, or I'll fall asleep at the table." Exact same thing, right? So this is the first time where you actually start thinking about, okay, maybe this is a case of schizophrenia, but not really. Maybe they're the same people, we don't know. Now, at some point, what happens is that the actor asks her to post the letter that she's written to her friends. And so she takes the letter and she's bringing it to the city, but बीच में ही वो देखती है कि जो लेटर है वो खुला हुआ है तो वो लेटर पढ़ लेती है और उस लेटर में बेसिकली the actor is writing to her friends about the nurse and she's saying things like it's really fun trying to understand this nurse and she's basically psychoanalyzing this nurse now, which to her seems like a betrayal of her trust because in this letter she's writing about all of the secrets that she spilled to her last night and all of the vulnerabilities that she let out to her, and so now she feels like she's betrayed and she feels really hurt about the entire affair. Now, this again in the film, this plays out so naturally that if in your life, if you've had such an experience happen to you, this will hit you differently. Just with the silence of the sequence, just with the dialogue writing and the performances, it just really hits you if you've ever sort of experienced the dynamic wherein you open up to somebody and they let out all your secrets. Before moving to the next sequence, I did want to quickly show you this, where, as I said before, with the first fourth wall breaking. So we have this frame जहाँ पे ज़्यादा कुछ हो नहीं रहा है, बस ये एक बीच का सीक्वेंस है, और एकदम से she appears and she clicks a photo of the camera of the audience, and this again is to frequently make the audience aware of the fact that, like, this is a film, we are characters in a film. And as I said, that this was also a time where Bergman was starting to be inspired and influenced by the French New Wave. So he was also incorporating a lot of those tropes in his films. He was experimenting within the editing, he was also experimenting with the fourth wall. So now what happens is, and this is also a very interesting sequence, she tries to somehow get back at her for breaking her trust. This shot also is so good in terms of how it's lit. And this is also a very long shot. It just stays on her. And so while she's picking up her hat, somehow she drops the glass, और वो नीचे पूरा glass गिर के टूट जाता है. Then she picks up the pieces, but I think intentionally she leaves one piece there. And what's interesting about this sequence is how it's shot. And we'll see the sequence once and then I'll tell you what was interesting. Just one second. So we see that the glass piece is there, but we see that, and she's kept it there for the actor to come and sort of step on it so that in some way to hurt her. But in the first time, we see that she avoids the glass and she walks right past it. Even the second time, and she is noticing this the entire time. And the second time that she sees coming, she again passes by the glass unscathed. And then she gets up, the nurse, and then she goes in. And at the same time now, when the camera is angled upwards, we see that she steps on the glass and she says, "Ouch." So this is something that Bergman was a master of, and you also see this in also so many other sequences in this film. Filmmaking is as much about what you don't show in the frame as it is about what you show in the frame, right? So the first two times when we see that she is unscathed by the glass, we see that. So that builds tension, right? And now we're thinking whether it's actually going to happen. And now we're not even seeing that. In a way, this might also have been to reduce budget and reduce complexity because blood and glass goes into skin. But it also works in terms of tension building and in terms of build up. And you also see this in another sequence in this film itself, that now we're looking up and then the action happens. This is a great tool to use in a film if you ever make a film. So now what happens is, oh yeah, this was also an interesting detail that I was reading. So quite specifically, somehow Bergman has gone on record to say that he has never been able to authentically respond to the Vietnam War or the Holocaust, which is which is something very interesting to note about yourself and recognize in yourself. And I was thinking about this when I read this. So maybe it is that if such an event, and I was thinking into myself also, that am I able to authentically respond to the Holocaust or the Vietnam War, although none of these things have happened in my lifetime. And then I realized that, like, maybe if such a historical event is already prefaced with such horror, there is already a well-established horror around such an event. It just feels so surreal and it feels so far away. I don't know if even I can authentically respond to it. And so that one insecurity Bergman has tried to also portray in his film, wherein we see that the actor figure, when she's at the hospital, she's looking at these images of the Vietnam War, or rather the effect of it in America. And her response is very made up. It's very unconvincing and it's inauthentic. And it feels like it's intentionally made up, as if she's like overdoing it. And so this in a way also tells us about this character, that she's just not, in her response to such terrific things, terrible things, I'm sorry, terrible things, she is not being genuine. I thought that was interesting. So now we basically come to the ending actually, wherein this is when it becomes clear to us that okay, never in the film it actually says that they're the same person, but Susan Sontag also wrote this in her review that I think they're the same people. I think, like it's almost like Fight Club in a way, like you create the other character in your head just to take care of you or just to make things simpler to understand. So at the last day at the beach house, she wakes up and she sees that the actor is packing up her things to go. And but this is the last time we see her, the actor. She's packing things, and then we very cleverly cut to the next scene, and then we see that she's the one who's packing things. And then we see that she goes out, and then also, as I said, that form breaking and everything. Right in the middle, for no particular reason, we see that there is a film crew who's filming something, and then a bus comes and it takes her away. And then we also cut to the mother imagery again, and then to end it, we also see that the film reel has ended in the ending montage, and then we see that the carbon lighting thing has also been blown off. One of the interesting things in this film also is that it fades to white so often, which is a very interesting artistic decision that Bergman must have taken at some point. Because I've rarely seen films cut fade to white or cut to white, but Bergman decided to do that in a film, which is something that adds that fascinating element to the film also and makes it a unique film even within the Bergman filmography. So essentially, since we are covering duality, I did want to talk about this conversation that they have while they're at the beach house. So the nurse is asking her a very innocent question, and she says, is it really so important not to lie, to tell the truth, to speak in a genuine tone of voice? Can a person really live without babbling away, without lying and making up excuses and evading things? Isn't it better to just let yourself be silly and sloppy and dishonest? Maybe a person gets better by just letting herself be who she is. The doctor said you're mentally healthy, but I wonder if your madness isn't the worst kind. You act healthy, and the worst thing is everyone believes you, except me, because I know how rotten you are. And then she's talking about her husband later on. But this entire questioning sequence, wherein her questions are so genuine and her questions are so authentic, and it seems like this is actually something that she is conflicted with, whereas the actor on the other hand has accepted these things about herself because she's also been in the theater business for so long. And after a point it must happen that there is a moment wherein you're thinking, wait a second, but isn't my real life persona also a character that I'm playing? And this is something that has also happened to Jim Carrey, which is something I talked about in earlier streams. And if you look at his contemporary interviews, he's quite open about the fact also that, he says that um I was very lucky to have gotten the role of Jim Carrey, and it was fun playing him, but I think I'm done with it now. So this becomes a very interesting segue to kind of understand that there is a persona that we sort of project onto other people. I think the idea in itself that everybody that you know knows you as somebody else, and maybe you know yourself as somebody else. And as I said at the beginning of this live stream, in the age of social media, again, this becomes very interesting food for thought. Like, is your personality actually just a projection, or are you being your authentic self? So this is a film that makes you question that and makes you think about that through this person's character. And then we also see that, like, he explores duality and he sees that, like, they're basically the same person. And throughout the film ये उसको explore करते रहते हैं, dialogue में भी visually भी. So we see that उनको morph करता है, आधा face उनका आधा face इनका. This was what I had to share about the film, and I would definitely recommend this film to people who, one, are interested in any kind of experimentation in form, and two, if you've ever in your life had a kind of experience wherein you've sort of had a moment wherein you're questioning your own persona or your own sort of social operation, or how you think you are versus how other people think you are. If you've sort of been in that conflict, and if that has made you fall into a kind of silence for a long duration, wherein you're just trying to find who your authentic self is. And if you've been through that experience, or if you are going through that experience, you should watch this film, because this film will not only validate your conflicts but also help you in many ways to actually deal with that conflict. And Buddhism, in a way, becomes a very interesting school of thought in this entire experience, because what Buddhism essentially is saying, that it's ego dissolution. Like, they're saying that there is no ego, there is no identity. So anything, any kind of social operation is just for your own convenience. You're really just playing all of these characters. This also, in a way, is theater. Like me speaking on the live stream, it's theater in a way. Life is theater. So so now we can look at the poster again, and this photograph actually is also a very, one sec. Yeah, this one. I really like this photograph, the composition of it. I'm sure Bergman would have also made a great photographer. I'm not sure Sven Nykvist ने भी photography करी है क्या, but it would be very interesting to see his work also. Sejal Mal, Black Swan climax fade to white to give us dream feeling, I guess. Yeah, in a way. And also, it was just that constant rebellion against the form, also. But yeah, that must also be that key. If you're fading to white, as I said earlier, it's a very interesting and intentional artistic decision that you're taking. Purnendu to do, thank you so much, man. He has given us a super chat of 100 rupees. He says, good job, man, keep it up. Thank you, Purnendu. We will, and I will. While you're here, I would also like to say that you should consider becoming a community member of the channel if you want to, and if you enjoy and want to support the kind of content that Chalchitra Talks is creating. And if you also like my series, please consider giving us super chats and helping us support this channel. Tarun Jain, the last shot is my favorite. It also ends the same way that it opens up, actually, with the same montage sequence, but just in reverse. So in a way, that also adds to the entire sort of form experimenting that he's trying to do, wherein he wants you to become aware of the fact that when a film is starting and when a film is ending, and whatever is happening in between is performance, it's theater. There are so many layers to this film, and as I said, that this is the Mount Everest for film critics, and everybody is just trying to climb that mountain and figure out their own interpretations of this film. So yeah, that was it. I definitely recommend Bergman and this film. And we had also looked at Winter Light in the first episode, so maybe you should watch that film also, and then see the first episode of this live stream. So yeah. Settleman, what's the topic of the next episode? I am not sure, but I was thinking that I might do Dogtooth. Maybe. I'm not too sure, but yeah. Cool. Thank you so much for attending, guys, and I'll see you all in the next episode. Bye bye.